All right, good morning. Sorry I can't be there in person, but we'll we will persevere. First thing I want to do is share a short video clip that I think you'll find amusing, and it has to do with our reading. So without further ado, let's hold off on that for just a second. So I want to make sure you get the benefit of the video and the audio. So,
you're gonna get used to wearing them chains after a while, Luke. But you never stop listening to them clinking. Because they're gonna remind you of what I've been saying. For your own good.
Wish you'd stop being so good to me, Captain.
Don't you ever talk that way to me. Never! Never! What we've got here is failure to communicate. Some men you just can't reach. So you get what we had here last week.
all right. So that was from Cool Hand Luke. Pretty old show, all in all, but it's also quoted at the beginning of chapter 4, as you probably noticed. Great movie, classic movie, if you get a chance to see it. It's it's one of the all-time best. So I know that you're concerned about some things, maybe anxious a little bit. This particular class period, we're going to kind of finish up with Dr. Clegg, Dr. Michael Clegg, who's the assistant superintendent for personnel here in Hayesville, and he'll have a presentation for you having to do with recruitment and selection, and I know you'll enjoy that. We'll also have a discussion of some of the things in the chapters that you read, but first and foremost, we're going to review some things that are coming up that I think you all are fixated on a little bit, and I want to reassure you. So I'm going to take us to first of all, the syllabus. And so remember, this week we have our first guest speaker, and remember in the syllabus we have a copy of a rubric that gives you an idea of what to include in your guest speaker summary. So the speaker's name, school or district level position, the topic, the key points, new insights or learnings, how you think you might be able to personally apply the concepts in the future as a principal, and additional information on the topic that you would like. Having all of those topics would make your summary complete. So as you're working on that, try to make sure that you hit every one of those topics just to make sure that you have a very complete summary. And moving on down the page, the position paper coming up is the personnel paper. So it says right here, develop a recruitment and selection process for hiring teachers. Be sure to include recruitment processes, selection processes, 10 interview questions, a timeline for the process, procedural details, and other pertinent information related to orientation and mentoring of new teachers. Below we have a rubric, and I don't want you to pay any attention to that particular rubric. Stay on the bullet point here and just focus on that. Now, in order to help you, I have also been given the opportunity to share with you a a paper from student from last summer's class. So I left her name off, but where you see first and last name, that would be where you put your first and last name, of course. As you move down the page, you'll notice the topics. There's an introduction. There's the recruitment process. There's a selection process and procedural details. There's an alternate process. You can skip that part. Interview questions. Go ahead and include the interview questions. Give a process timeline. What you would do to orient and mentor new teachers. Programming for, and then the conclusion. Most people, when they did this paper, they included a reference to Dr. Clagg and his presentation, and they also included a reference to our textbook. So feel free to look that over as you put your paper together. You can't copy anything out of it, obviously, but the format's the key thing. So if you end up with a paper that looks similar to this, that's your own creation, you know you're in good shape. So just wanted to hit those 2 points just to get you going. So we'll stop sharing and get back to the process here. Personnel and communication. Now, I also want you to know that this particular class will not last the full 3 hours. I know you're relieved about that. We're not going to have as much time, or actually any time, for any interaction. So I want you to pay attention to the key points that I cite for you, and I'll try to interject some stories to highlight some things, and we'll get through these 3 chapters in good shape. So the basics of communication. One of the key things I want you to remember is anytime you put anything out in writing, your teachers will scrutinize it. Make sure that you proofread, and maybe even better yet, have your secretary proofread anything that you are going to send out, especially to the entire faculty and staff. In the event that you send an email out to all staff and you haven't done any proofreading, and it goes out with grammatical errors, I've known faculties that would actually take the time to have one member use a red pen to circle the errors, and then, to be helpful, they post that in the teacher's lounge. Now, you can avoid all that if you'll just take the time to proofread, but this job, you will be in a hurry quite a bit, but trust me, take the time to proofread. You will not regret it. When you look at how you communicate with staff, you'll have choices to make. Everything from face-to-face, which is honestly the very best form of communication, all the way through written correspondence, emails, text messages, some that are not very good, not very effective. Now, some are more efficient than others. So what you need to do as the building leader is to determine what kind of communication you're going to use based upon the kind of conference you are going to have, or the kind of communication you're going to have with a staff member or your entire staff. So if you're going to have a meeting that's not terribly serious, but you want to make sure that the person understands the details and how important things are, and you can go down to their classroom during their planning time or before or after school and have a quick stand-up meeting and talk to them and express yourself, get their feedback. More importantly, make sure they understand exactly what has been said and what you expect. If it's a more serious situation, then you can have them report to your office. Now, I hesitate to do this because it generally speaking scares people. They think I'm going to ask them to resign their positions or something. And so as principal, you're going to have to be careful when you use that, because you don't want to scare your staff, usually. Sometimes you want to get their attention, in which case you might want to have them come in and actually visit with you. Once again, you're going to check for understanding before they leave to make sure that they understood exactly what was supposed to be understood at that meeting. So then there can be more formal communication that occurs, and that would be in the form of a written reprimand, those kinds of things. Now, in this case, for a written reprimand, you're going to want to make sure that you've talked to your superintendent or an attorney to make sure that you're on the right track and that everything is worded absolutely correctly. So on page 73, you see a list of things, different ways to communicate based on richness, from highest to lowest. Use that full array and choose wisely. We talked about this before in terms of active listening, but I wanted to reiterate this. Be sure to use the last technique. Remember, listen, apologize, solve, thank. You're going to listen deeply. You're going to listen to the person. They may tell you the same story 3 times. You'll probably be taking some notes, but you want them to make sure that they feel like they have been listened to. You're also going to apologize, not to take the blame for anything, but to just tell them, I'm really sorry you're going through this. Then you're going to work with them to come up with some solutions that will be mutually satisfactory and agreeable. And finally, you're going to thank them for bringing this to your attention. Now, if you've done this well, there's a good chance that they will also thank you for taking the time to help them solve their problem. When you're going to have a difficult conversation, or one that you're not sure what direction it might go, it's really important to rehearse various scenarios. So you think you might be having a conference with one of your teachers and you think, this isn't any big deal. But they're having a bad day and you come down, you express your opinion to them, not thinking it's very serious. In them having their bad day, they blow up and start yelling at you. And if you're not prepared, you can end up yelling back at them. That can create some issues that could have been avoided. So if you rehearse the various things that could happen, then instead of reacting, you'll take some time, you'll pause, and then you'll respond. Now, when you're the principal of the building, you're the one who sets the tone for the climate in the building. And if you're positive, if you're professional, that sets the tone for your building. If you're arbitrary, if you're always angry, if you never smile, that also sets the tone for your building. So you get to choose, and I would suggest positive and professional is the very best way to go. There was kind of a funny thing on page 78 in the middle of the page. One of the authors refers to a priest or priestess that you might find in a building that you would take over as the principal. And this would be a very, very powerful, informal leader of your building. And I'll give you a quick story of something that happened to me in a previous location. I thought it'd be a good idea to go to each of the buildings and have kind of a Socratic dialogue about expectations and philosophy of education and that kind of thing. And there was a K4 building I went to, and I expressed to the faculty and staff that I expected for every child to be challenged through the curriculum. So by that I mean, if you have a first grader and they're ready for third grade math, that you will take the time to make sure that they get that kind of experience. And I was corrected by the priestess of the building, who had been born and raised in that town. And she told me that that's not how they do it in this building. In fact, they've noticed that from time to time, they'll get a kindergartner that's been worked with at home, and they're a little ahead of some of the other students. But they don't treat them any differently. And by the fourth grade, they're all about the same. Now, I was pretty horrified when I heard her say this because, quite frankly, that meant she was dumbing down gifted students. And I can't tolerate that. But what I did was I thought, okay, we'll just see how this works out. So when my oldest daughter got to be in the fourth grade, I made sure that she had this teacher for her teacher out of the 3 that we could choose from in that grade level. And then at the end of the first quarter, I went and I talked to the teacher and I said, so, how are things going with my daughter? And she said, you know, she is so far ahead of the other students, I've had to give her other assignments. I think I understand what you were talking about. Now, she was pretty advanced. She went on to be a national merit finalist and graduated in 3 years from college, Phi Beta Kappa. So that's an unusual circumstance, and I wanted to make sure that I made my point with that particular teacher, not in a mean way, but for her to expand her thinking about how best to challenge every student throughout the curriculum. So, effective communication behaviors, frequent, positive, honest, prepared, online, humorous. Don't be afraid to use humor. Use it appropriately. When you're putting something in writing, be careful what you put in writing, legally speaking. If you're sending an email to a colleague or to the superintendent and you say disparaging things about a student or a parent, and there ends up being a lawsuit, their attorney is going to ask for all the correspondence between you and the superintendent. And that could be pretty embarrassing. Now, I usually follow the rule of thumb of if I don't want something to come back on me later, I don't put it in writing. I may say it on the telephone, I may say it face-to-face, but I usually don't put it in a place where it could be used against me later. So, in terms of communication and working with change and working with your faculty, one of the things that I learned from Rick and Becky DeFore was that you kind of wonder when it's okay to go on. When is it appropriate for you, having heard from all of the members of your staff how they feel about a new initiative? Do you have to have 100% buy-in before you can move? And Rick and Becky DeFore say no. What they told us is that once everyone has had their say and the will of the majority of the group is evident, then you move on. Okay, moving on to Chapter 5. Personnel and conflict resolution. There will be conflict. If you avoid it, that can be a bigger problem than actually taking it on. Once again, you want to make sure that you think things through. Timing is important. Rehearsing is absolutely important. One of the things that we talk about here is that we no longer express things as problems. We have situations that require us to think and change how we do things. We call those opportunities. So I'm fond of saying to my subordinates, have I got an opportunity for you? And most of them don't run when I say that, but they think about it. So instead of talking about challenges and problems, talk about opportunities instead. Okay, moving on to the Chapter 6, personnel and recruitment and selection. And we've talked about this a little bit already, and Dr. Clegg is going to talk about it in depth. But you want to make sure that when you are beginning to look for somebody to bring on to replace somebody on staff or for a new position, that you kind of begin with the end in mind. And by that I mean you look at, okay, what's it going to take for us to pick the best person and make sure that that person is successful? So one of the things that you probably experienced as a teacher was there was some sort of orientation and or mentoring program that you went through. Now, the orientation program was probably, it was like most places, just a couple of days where you got greeted by the superintendent, you spent some time with your principal, you were given a mentor, you spent some time with them. You went to personnel, filled out some paperwork, you went to the business office and filled out some more paperwork, and and then after those 2 days, school started. That's better than my experience as a first-year teacher in 1975, when I was basically given a grade book and a key to my classroom and directed to where my classroom was, and the principal said, "Good luck, we'll see you in June." That's not the kind of orientation that is very helpful, and it's not the kind of orientation that we have. In my district, our current orientation program is 8 full days. Now, we still do the things that people did before in terms of working with personnel and the business office and so on, but we also take the time to make sure that our new teachers understand literacy first, which is our teaching model, and capturing kids' hearts, which is one of the things we use to help students and staff develop mutual respect. And both those trainings take 3 full days each. So we have 8 full days for people to come in. They get paired with a mentor. The mentor works with them throughout the year. We have meetings that are scheduled throughout the year with the mentor and the teacher on various topics. We want to make sure that our teachers are successful. In a previous location, I was thinking, back when the base salary was only $24,000, if a teacher got a 2.5% raise every year and worked their way across the salary schedule, and worked for 30 years, and you added up all that money, how much would that total be? And so I did the math, and it's actually over $1 million. So we actually put together a presentation that we did at a statewide conference that was called "Treat All of Your New Teachers Like They're Worth $1 million," because they are. So when you think about that kind of investment that you're going to make in your teachers, making sure that they're successful is absolutely critical. So that's the end part. Now, backing up from that, how do you go about making sure you're picking the best teacher? And how do you make sure that when they're going through the process, they really enjoy what they're doing and want to come and work for you? Because many of them will have options. So if you think about when you want to make a decision and then back up about 6 weeks, then that's about the time that you want to make sure that you get the advertising done for the position. And as we talked about, the Kansas Education Employees Board, that's where most people go to look for jobs, and most people go to post their teaching jobs. So you want to make sure that that's posted appropriately. Many times districts are posting on their own website, which is a little more tedious, and that people have to go and look at a variety of different websites. But doing both is good exposure. And you want to make sure that the most people that you possibly can get to see that you have an opening and are attracted to it enough that they apply. So as you're setting up your system, you'll be looking at, okay, so that's the date that we're going to advertise. And then looking at 6 weeks after that or so, you're going to say, okay, this is when applications and all materials are due. And you're going to have to decide, what do you want the materials to be comprised of? Certainly a letter of application, the application, and a resume are kind of the bare minimum. But ask for those things and make sure that those things are turned in by the deadline that you've set up. And if they're not, that's a little bit of a red flag that this person may not be as well organized as you would like. So look at the complete applications, assuming you have enough of those, and work your way through those. I wouldn't even spend any time at all looking at incomplete applications unless you don't have very many. So as you're working through those, you have taken the time to look at the qualities of the teacher that you want to hire. And so as you look through the resume and look through the application and the letter of application, you begin looking for, okay, who matches up best? Who would I want to have? Who do I want to know more about? And who do I want to have in for an interview? And so you can begin sorting people into what we call the good pile. And if you're fortunate in this day and age, you'll have at least 10 people to choose from. Long time ago, when I first started as a superintendent, I had an opening for a second grade teacher, and I had 150 applications. That's tough. How do you weed through 150 second grade applications? Got a dandy, got a great one, but I'm sure there are a whole bunch of winners in that pile that I didn't even talk to. So you decide how many you want to talk to, and then you also decide if you want some teacher input, if you want to put together a teacher panel. And then, as Dr. Clegg will tell you, you want to be very, very careful in terms of helping them look at the qualities they're looking for and designing questions for them so that they don't ask any illegal questions during the process. So once you've designed your questions and you have a panel, let's say, and you interview the teacher and you get feedback, remember it's feedback from the teacher panel. It's not a vote. They don't get to decide. They don't have an administrative license. You do. It's your call. So you get input from them. You look at the qualities you were looking for. You look through their materials again. You look at their answers to the questions that you had, how they did in the overall interview, and then you get to rank the applicants. And you decide, okay, who's the top one, who's second, who's third, and then you make a call and make the offer. Now, the language for that can be tricky if you're inexperienced doing it. So, you call the person on the phone, you remind them who you are, you tell them how much you enjoyed visiting with them when they came in for their interview, and then you say something along the lines of, pending board approval, I'm prepared to offer you the position of fourth grade teacher at this salary based upon verification of the personnel department in terms of experience and hours. And then you've already asked them during the process, if you're offered the job, how long do you want to think about it? And so you make the offer, you remember, or you can go back and look, they said they wanted 24 hours. Sometimes if they're real excited, they'll just say, oh, I don't need any time at all. I'll just take it. And that's great. Then you make sure that you contact the others and make sure that they're informed either via mail, email, or best yet, a phone call. Now, I left out one very, very important thing. Before you make the offer, you've got to do a reference check. They're going to list people that they want you to talk to. Now, you're going to rarely find a negative reference that way. So what you can do is ask the reference for the name and telephone number, contact information for someone else. And so that gets one step away. And if there's anything out there, you're more likely to find it from a second level reference than the first level reference. The other thing is you've got to be careful and serious about how you ask the reference questions. One of the ones I like to ask is, do you know of anything in this person's background that if it came to light would bring dishonor to my school district? Well, if they swallow hard, that's not a good sign. In most cases, there isn't anything out there. Now, you will have the background check that the person has done in order to get a license. I mean, you won't see that, but you know they've gone through that process. So that's a pretty good sign. But you can find out a lot by talking to a previous supervisor and find out, if they have a great work ethic, if they're well organized. Are they a high quality teacher? What's an example they can give you of a lesson that they observed that the students were really engaged in? What kind of assessment scores do they get? Those kinds of things. How do they get along with their colleagues? Ask for evidence. Some people will try to just kind of blow you off when you ask for a reference. Don't let that happen. If they say, oh yeah, they do that great, then say, well, what evidence can you give me about that? And if there's evidence, they'll be able to give it to you easily. If they're making stuff up, there'll be some silence. So keep that in mind too. On page 108, table 6.2 has a great list of the various stages of how you go about the selection process. When you're coming up with interview questions, remember you've already brainstormed the qualities you're looking for. When you put together those questions, make sure they're open-ended. Make sure they begin with things like, tell me about a time that a student did something and how you responded to it. Open-ended, where they have to present a recollection of how they did that. If it's not a recollection, if they're a first-year person, they may not have a lot of that. Ask them hypothetical questions that have to be answered in essay form. And when I say essay form, you're not going to ask them to write it down, but it's not going to be a yes or no answer. So they're going to have to elaborate, and that's going to give you a lot of knowledge into understanding their depth of knowledge. When you're having the interview, and one of the things to remember is you want to make sure the person is comfortable. Sometimes you'll get people who are very, very anxious and nervous, and spend some time getting them to feel comfortable. Ask them some questions about their hobbies, about traveling, if they had any trouble finding the building. See if you can get their heart rate down a little bit. This is not an exercise in intimidation or how you deal with pressure. We want to have high quality answers here. So if you can get them to calm down, you have a better chance of getting that done. Make sure there's no distractions in the room as well. Make sure it's a quiet area where you can spend time talking to them and just listening to them without interruption. One of the things that one of my subordinates taught me just a few years ago, which was kind of interesting, as you've gone through interviews, you probably remember that it was basically an auditory experience. You didn't get to see the questions. You didn't see the questions beforehand. The interviewer held the questions so you couldn't see them, and then they asked you the question and expected you to answer right away. Well, most of the job that you have as a teacher doesn't require you to make snap judgments at all. In fact, you're better off if you get the chance to reflect. So this was pointed out to me by one of my principals who was looking for a job in Colorado, and she said she had an experience where when she got there, they gave her a copy of the questions 10 minutes beforehand and said, go ahead and make notes. And then when you come in, when I ask the question, you can read along on your piece of paper, and then you'll have your notes to look at just in case you may have forgotten something. That made a whole lot of sense to me. So ever since then, when we're interviewing for administrators, I always give the interviewee, the candidate, a copy of the questions beforehand and tell them to go ahead and make notes. Now, I collect it before they leave. I don't want the questions to be out there for other people to think about years and years in advance. On the other hand, I do want some depth of knowledge, and I want them to have some time to consider an answer and maybe remember a time 2 or 3 years ago that they can pull up, as opposed to just seeing how fast they can think on their feet, being an auditory learner only. So when you're setting it up, keep that in mind too. All right, so that's all we have for today. If we'd been face-to-face, I would have asked for more interaction, and it would have taken a lot longer. But as it stands, I appreciate your attention. The assignment will be, of course, to read the final 2 chapters of the book. And then, of course, we'll be online again after this coming week on July 4th. I'll have that all ready for you as well. Remember your guest speaker summary. Remember to get that uploaded before the next class. And remember, as you begin working on the personnel position paper, look at the model paper. Don't copy it, of course. but just look at it as a model, and that should reassure you and help you turn in a better product. So as we say every week, any questions? I don't anticipate any. Any questions before we go? Hearing none, have a great week. Thanks.